I have with me here Uma, who is a level 2 member. This sadly, it was actually her last semester with us because she's going off to a brick and mortar school next year. Although I'm still working on her to come to one of our after school clubs because she won't have nearly enough to do with all of her things. One of the things Uma and I talked about, you can tell on her appearance right now how it looks kind of fuzzy. Talk to me a minute, Uma, about how you figured out how to fix that.
All right. Well, this is my computer and it has a very terrible camera. So if I went into settings, there would be in the video area. It has the touch up my appearance and the adjust for low light. So for me, I had my touch up very high and the adjust for low light very high. But if I slide it down slightly, or pretty low,
Oh, that looks
it looks
fabulous.
dark, but it's clearer.
That's funny too, because most people who try to touch up their appearance are maybe over 30 and, want to get rid of some of the wrinkles. So clearly you didn't need that. Thank you. And then another question I wanted to ask you, Uma, you're really good in your speeches at using your camera for eye contact. And I wondered if you could talk a minute about any tricks you use to make good eye contact.
Wow. Um, I grew up doing theater, so it was trained in me to really make eye contact with the audience. So I would look at the audience and really just stare at them, stare them down. But now that it's not really you're looking at people, I some tricks that I would give would be to what I would do is I would pick a spot on the wall, like a smudge or a crack or something, and just stare at that while I'm reciting my speech. And I refuse to look away. Another tip, actually, I have another one, is sometimes I would take a bright colored piece of paper or something and I'd tape it next to the camera so the bright colors would like catch my attention. So
Oh, that's a
kind
good
of like
trick.
yeah.
That's good. Also, a third thing, Uma she was noticing that when she stands up to answer an impromptu, she would end up looking down at the camera. So tell me how you've solved that.
Yes. So currently I am at my desk. And when I do my impromptus, I have to like tip the camera up so I look like this, which is it doesn't really have good lighting and I'm kind of hunched over. But when I move my laptop to a more elevated space, like over here, which is like on top of a dresser or something, I have better lighting and you can see me without being all like kind of shrunken like a snail.
That is fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing your tips with us, Uma. All
Thank you.
right. All right, this is Jack. He is level 4 member of Speakers League. He has been in the club for several years. Way back in Burbank, we were in a little room, a little classroom with a bunch of school kids. So Jack has had some conversations with me about his setup. As you can see, he's got the whole world in his hands, the whole world behind him. But if you notice, right above Jack's head right now, you see a beaming light from heaven pointing on him that sort of interferes with his light setup. So,
Yes.
Jack, we had a conversation a minute ago about how you could fix that. Why don't you kind of walk us through, tilt your camera up and show us what we're dealing with and what we're going to do to fix it?
Yes. And also, I think the one thing I want to say is also notice that I'm sitting down too. When I stand up, this would probably actually be right in my face instead
Ooh,
of
try
on
it.
top
Stand
of
up
it.
and let's see.
So if we stand up, it's actually on my face instead of
Yes.
on top of it, which is even worse because in speaking, you use your mouth, which is on your face. Uh, so your face is pretty important. But so we'll tilt this up and we see that it's coming
Ah,
from this
yes.
light.
Your
So
chandelier.
yes, yes. And so what I did is I took this little piece of paper. We've got two pieces of tape on the end, and I'll just kind of hug it, I guess. make it friendly. And we've got these two beams as well, but they'll actually be blocked out when I put this down. So we don't actually really have to worry about those.
Oh, that's great. Now stand up and let's see how you look standing up. Oh, that's wonderful. All right. Also, I'd like you to show everybody how you set up for your whole room. What do? You had turned your camera earlier when we were talking. Show us what you do.
Right. So I'll turn it around. I will admit I didn't quite prep the entire room for this, but what I have is it's on my dining room table, and we have this stack of books here. I need that little extra height because I'm a little tall. And so I scooted the dining room table back to make room and put the books on here so I can put the computer on those. But something different I did is I scooted the dining room table to the side. And so when I did that, it allows me to put my music stand right next to the computer. And so my notes are on the music stand, which are in the computer that would probably be like right there. And so my notes are just almost a foot to a half of a foot away, which allows me when I look at my notes, it almost is eye contact almost. It's almost like a little hat. And so I definitely use that. I've used that for my speeches, my evaluations. I use it for everything I've done this entire year. And it makes it just easier. I'm not using my hands. It's not taking away or detracting from anything I'm doing. It's just a quick little glance, head nod to the side, and I see my notes. So that's definitely something I do different. I've just got my book here. It's a little messy, I'll grant you.
That's perfect.
I've got my Zoom code right here, and that's about everything.
Awesome. Scoot back around and get back to your map. That's fabulous. Jack's actually going to be helping to judge some of the contests today. Having been a level 4 member, he's also served as club president, vice president, and club manager in our meetings. And we are so glad to take advantage of your expertise here today. So thanks so much, Jack.
Yes, you're very welcome.
All right. As everybody knows, Julia is the founder of Speakers League, and I love how hard she's worked on putting together the whole online aspects of Speakers League, because as everybody has learned in this whole year, there's a lot of differences between an in-person meeting and an online meeting. And so as Julia and I were talking about this panel, she showed me a life hack that she came up with in order to change the camera position for impromptu speeches. And I wanted to get her on video demonstrating this fabulous life hack that everyone should take time to do. Julia, take it away.
All right. Well, probably everybody knows that what happens in the meetings is people will stand up and they'll, oh, let me adjust this. No, that's not enough. Okay, how's this? And there's all the ceiling.
How's this?
Yeah, exactly. So what I have learned is that if I look at my closet door behind me, and if I raise my screen up to just the top of the closet door, right there, I know I'm all set, and I move right out here, and I'm in perfect position to do my impromptu or whatever it is I need to stand for. That's my pro tip, is to have something on your wall that you can use as your marker to set it up.
That is absolutely brilliant in its simplicity. It's something I never would have even thought of. So thank you so much, Julia. Another pro tip from your club chairperson. Thanks, Julia.
Take care.
Hello, everybody. I'm here with Haley and Haley's dad, who will pop in here in a minute. Haley is one of our level 2 members. And the problem we found with Haley is that Haley is not a teenager. She has a little tiny, very energetic voice, but the pitch of her voice is very high. So Haley, I'm going to have you stand up like you were answering an impromptu and just read something or recite something so everybody can hear the problems we were having with your sound.
Okay. Roses are red, violets are blue. Something rhymes with blue. Please
Okay, so the problem we were having with Haley is if she wasn't facing directly at the camera or if she was standing too far back, her sound would cut in and out. So I recruited Haley's dad, who's going to pop his face in here. And why don't you tell us your first name?
Hi, I'm Mel.
Hi, Mel. So Mel is our tech support guru, and we've spent weeks and weeks troubleshooting and figuring this out. So, Mel, talk a little bit about the things that you tried to change and what finally worked.
Sure. Actually, you reminded me of one of our earlier problems was she was looking like not at the camera on her laptop. So we actually placed like a pink circle around the camera and had arrows pointing at it so that she would speak towards the camera. Little did we know the microphone, I believe, is right next to the camera. So part of it was blocked by the piece of paper. And so we removed that. We had some small improvement on the sound, so that was good. Our next step was to look at the microphone. We went with like a lapel mic from Amazon. I think it was about $15. She didn't really like it, so we went to a second step, which was using a headset with a built-in microphone. This was more comfortable for her. Also, since the sound was cutting off when she was getting like higher pitched or excited, we decided to look at the Zoom settings for the audio settings. And inside there, we saw some noise cancellation options. It's defaulted to auto cancellation. And we played around with the high, middle, and low settings, and we found that the low setting was helpful in it wouldn't reduce her sound as much when she got excited. So those were kind of some of the steps we did to try to improve the audio quality for her audience.
Oh, that's great. Would you mind putting the headset on, Haley, and let's hear the final result?
Okay, hold a sec. There's so many wires.
You plug it in. There we go.
Uh-oh, and right there, she froze up, but let's hear you.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, so
Than
stand
before?
back like you would for an impromptu. You you have almost long enough. Yeah, that's actually step forward just a little more and you'll be just right. And talk, say what you said before. And use your
Hello.
gestures. Be a good level 2 member.
Violets are blue. Roses are red, violets are blue, and I don't know what ends with blue right now, so blue.
That's wonderful. All
Knock,
right,
knock.
that sounds who's there?
Orange.
Orange who?
Orange.
All right, you know
I
what?
said orange again.
We're actually about to start a speakers league meeting, so I've got to let your fellow members in. But Mel, thank you so much for your careful efforts with this. I think Haley's been the toughest hill we've had to climb sound wise. So your efforts have been well employed.
You're welcome, and thank you.
All right, thanks guys. We're going to have a little conversation with Cadence. She's a level 1 member in our club that was meeting in Pasadena before the pandemic. Cadence had an issue come up with positioning her camera and having some conflicts about where to look and how to do eye contact. And I'll just kind of turn it over to you, Cadence, to sort of talk through what happened and what you might do to fix it.
Sure thing. So I was giving my visual aid speech on kinetic sand, and I was attempting to show how to use kinetic sand a bit, what shapes you can make, what molds I have. So I wanted to still include my face. So what I ended up doing for that speech was having a camera pretty high up above my normal table and then pointing down at my whole body with like a shorter table with my kinetic sand bin there. However, the issue with this was that that camera I was using was not my computer webcam. So the gallery view of my audience essentially was off to the side. So I would be doing something and then I would look this way, not at the camera.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
Yeah.
You would talk for a while because
Exactly.
your natural inclination is to look at the faces.
Right.
And I think you were talking earlier about gauging their reaction and trying to see if you were connecting with your audience, which you would do by looking at their faces. But then,
Right.
as a
But
result,
then it looks like I'm not looking at them.
Yeah. So what do you think you could have done to fix that?
Honestly, the most simple solution would just be to stare directly at that non-sentient black dot, to just like how I am now, which is quite unnatural. I think everyone is struggling with it, especially now that we're online. But I think I could have just stared directly at that dot.
And the other thing too, I think, and it's come up in some of our meetings, is that if you were in a face-to-face meeting, you would be looking at your whole audience, including that one person that you're making eye contact with. I'm looking at the camera right now, but I would also shift my focus around, and I could even look, for example, in my setup, I have a big giant monitor behind my laptop. So if I'm looking at your face, I'd actually have to look up here, which would look very strange if I were giving a speech. So it takes a lot of practice and it's not intuitive what you have to do to make eye contact in online meetings. And I think since then you've changed your camera around and things that have made that a lot easier.
Yep.
One of the life hacks that I thought I would show you in my own house as a chairperson is that my home office is in my living room. My kitchen is right over there. The television's right over there. The stairs go right down next to me. And what I have found often during this year of Speakers League meetings is that my husband and my grown daughter, my college-age daughter, would literally ninja crawl behind me on the carpet to get from one side of the room to the other because they didn't want to interrupt my meeting and they didn't want to be seen on camera. One of the things that we came up with here is to come up with a backdrop that is portable and that I could use just to set up for meetings so that I wouldn't have to go downstairs into the dark extra bedroom and make that my studio. I like being where there's light and activity. So this might be something that you could use at home if you don't want people to see your room, because we don't like using virtual backgrounds. Virtual backgrounds tend to cut off hands, and actually I'm going to pause a minute and give a virtual background so that you could see what I'm talking about. I think all of you have noticed by now that with a virtual background, things just look strange. If I was using gestures in a speech, you'll notice that my hands tend to disappear unless they're right here in front of me. And they give peeks of the room behind you, which is just distracting and strange and pulls people out of the effectiveness of your speech. Therefore, we decided to ask people not to use backgrounds at all, and instead to try to come up with ways to, I'm going back to normal, to come back with ways to provide a backdrop. And the hack that my lovely husband came up with, I'm going to show you. We got on Amazon, along with everybody in the whole world, and we bought one of those rolling garment racks. So you can see here, it's just one of those plastic rolling garment racks. I think it was maybe $15. And I just put an old ironed sheet over it. And for every meeting, I roll it up from downstairs and I just pop it right behind me. The downside of it is that if I have to stand up, so far none of my Speakers League members have caught on to the fact that if we have time, they can ask me an impromptu question. But what I've got here now is a backdrop where nobody sees my family ninja crawling behind me. If I needed to stand up here, I would probably explain that I have a false backdrop and I would just stand up for my impromptu and do it with the backdrop there. I would also raise my desk. I have one of those adjusting desks so that I'm able to have my device high enough that I'm not looking down at everybody. It's less of a great life hack than what Julia has, but I would be able to do it that way. So just a little few tips to kind of try to figure out how to set up your space. Hello, everybody. We're here with Grant. He is a level 2 member. Grant gave a wonderful audience participation speech that Madam Chairperson completely spaced and forgot to record, or maybe I'd show it to you guys in total because it was fabulous. But Grant had specific needs that he had for the speech, so I asked Grant to talk a little bit about what he wanted to do and how he solved his problem.
So I wanted to, I wanted to have myself, my face, and then also my piece of paper because it's a paper airplane speech. And I also wanted to share my slides, which I should do right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I also want to share my slides.
And he messaged me in advance asking if there was a way we could feature all 3 of those, which, as it turns out, there is. So what I'm going to do is add another spotlight, and I'm going to take my face away. So this is how Grant's speech ended up looking. So when you stand up, Grant, and are giving your speech, show them how you were folding your paper airplane.
So I can fold my paper airplane or however I need.
And that way he was showing the process through the slides, and we could see what he was doing with his face. And the other thing I loved about it is that Grant continually ducked his head down into the frame and checked with his audience about whether they were following. He asked them to unmute themselves and check in with him so that he could tell that his audience was involved, which was fabulous. He did a great job and he won Best Speaker. So congratulations, Grant. Thank you for showing us that. This is just a great example, everybody, of thinking outside the box and planning ahead with different ideas so that you could make the most of your online presence at a Zoom meeting. All right, so Grant, I'm going to let you go. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jack and I were talking about eye contact and special things that he's done to prepare for giving his online speeches. Tell me a little, Jack, first about eye contact. What do you do to tell me what you were saying earlier?
Right. And so for eye contact, usually everyone stresses to look at the dot on your computer. And something that's interesting and weird that's almost happened to me is I'm actually not looking at the dot right now. I'm looking at myself. And maybe you notice now, or maybe you did notice, but in my speech class, I'm actually always credited for good eye contact, which is something really interesting because I probably look at the actual dot, which now I'm looking at around 20% of the time during a speech or impromptu. I'm actually most of the time looking at myself, which is really interesting because I'm credited with good eye contact, but I'm not looking at the dot most of the time. So that's something interesting too. It might be the shading. It could be just something else, or maybe it just looked like it. But
now, interestingly, tell me how you practice your speech. What do you do when you're practicing?
Right. One of the more important things that I do is I practice it in my parents' room where there's this big mirror. It's probably the only mirror actually tall enough for me to see what I'm saying. And so I'll practice my speech with that, which allows me to kind of see if my face is showing energy. I think that's one of the first things I look for because I think energy is what attracts people to the speech. And I definitely, gestures, all that things, all those things. And so I think that's definitely one of the other things that I do to practice. I definitely practice over and over again because I always outline it. It's always in outline form. So I have to practice it multiple times to make sure that I actually can be cued from my outline effectively.
So you use an actual outline for every speech you do?
Yes, I use an outline for every speech I do because I think that it really detracts from eye contact when you have to read a sentence. I just think it's so hard. And you're probably practicing the speech even at that still a good amount of times because you have to practice vocal variety and your gestures, I forget, and all those things. And so I'm practicing my speech probably the same amount of times or even less. And I'm using an outline form. And I feel like I'm just naturally getting more eye contact because I see 3 to 5 words and I can string together 2 to 3 sentences. And I think that that's really powerful. And so I've definitely tried to learn how to, if I can use the term, abuse that effectively for my speeches.
It's a great tool, and it's actually the reason that we ask you to create outlines for 3 of the speeches: organizing, knowledge, and then your first level 2 speech is the outline speech. And that's to get you in the habit of just using a word or 2 to remind you of the things that you already practiced in your parents' mirror. So that's perfect.
Yes, and I
All
think
right, thanks.
Yeah.
All right, Jack, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.